Today's video I'm really excited for. I'm going to be recommending you guys books that I wish I could reread for the first time again. Most of us have a book or multiple books that you constantly are thinking about. They're the books that stand out just a little bit more than the rest. They're either so groundbreaking or so magical that you cannot stop thinking about them. That may sound a little dramatic, but honest and truly, I do have a handful of books that I don't think I will ever forget about. A lot of the books that I'm going to talk about aren't even my favorite books necessarily, but they're books that when I read them, they made such an impact on my reading experience, or they changed me foundationally. I don't want to sound like crazy dramatic, but it's true. There are some books that changed the way I think and the way that I process fantasy or the way that I process real life, and that's because of reading. Because I can't read them for the first time again, that's why I'm making this video, because I want you to be able to read them. So if you haven't read any of these, I hope that some of these spark your interest and you will want to pick them up. This video, just to be clear, is not my original video. Many booktubers have done this video before, so I just want to put it out there. I will be putting the original one down in the description below if you want to watch it. I want to talk about the first book that got me back into reading. I feel like in middle school I was into reading for a little bit. It's kind of that Twilight era or Divergent and Hunger Games. Like, I was so into reading. I loved them when I was reading them, but then I would never pick anything back up. But when it came to college, my mom actually recommends most of my favorite books to me. So my mom recommended this one, A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This book specifically triggered my need to binge read books. I read this book in, I think, like a day and a half, and then there's two others because it is a trilogy. I was sucked in from the very beginning. I think if I reread it, I would have a little bit of a different reading experience, and I think that's what's so magical about that first time, is because this one got me hooked. I was like, okay, what next? What can I binge read next? This is what triggered my love for reading again. So I think this series will always have a special place in my heart. And again, it's not like my all-time favorite series ever, but because I remember the first time I read it so well, because I specifically remember I was a junior in college. This was only a few years ago. I think it was late 2019. I read it and I was like, no way. This is amazing. And I wanted that experience again. And then that led me to pick up A Court of Thorns and Roses, which isn't in this video. Like, I wish I could reread that for the first time again, but I feel like that's such a typical one. This is about Diana and Matthew. Matthew is a vampire and Diana is a student at Oxford, I believe. I don't really remember it. Again, it's like 3 years ago, but I remember the experience of reading it. It's basically their love story. I think a more sophisticated version of Twilight. There's so many cool side characters, and the second book is actually my favorite because they go back in time. They go back to, I think, the early 1600s or 1800s. I can't really remember, but the second book, called Shadow of Night, is my favorite book of the trilogy. A Discovery of Witches. Please pick it up if you're into vampires and love and romance and all of that stuff. Enough of that one. The next one I don't physically own, and I want to, I just haven't bought it yet. I read it earlier this year. It's called Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. Again, not necessarily a favorite book of mine, but such an impactful read. When I read it, I was like, oh, that's gonna stick with me for a little bit. The message behind this book is really important, and I think a lot of people should read it, even if it's a little upsetting. It's even gory at some points, and I'm like, not a big fan of the blood and guts and everything, but it was a very, very impactful story that I do think everyone should read. I think the thing that impacted me the most during this book is because it wasn't what I expected when I picked it up. I don't read the back of books when I pick them up. Judge me if you want. I don't like reading the summaries. I'd rather just read it, go in blind. And because I had gotten a recommendation for this book from someone on BookTube, I was like, let me pick it up. Maybe it's just a cute little fiction. It is not a cute little fiction. It's pretty dark and there's a lot of trigger warnings, so I do warn you, please look those up before you pick up this book. But it had a really good mix of all of these different things. It had some heartfelt moments, it had some really upsetting moments, some frustrating, some gory, some good action action scenes that I thought it was a very well-rounded book with a really solid message. This book is about Buddy Lee and Ike. Buddy Lee and Ike have 2 sons who married each other, and they do not really support this marriage. They don't support their relationship, and their 2 sons were murdered. And these 2 dads, having a lot of guilt because they didn't enjoy their few last years with their sons like they should have, kind of take it into their own hands to avenge their sons and figure out who murdered them. So it is kind of a murder mystery, but it's a little predictable. It hits hard. There's a big message, multiple messages in this book with homophobia and racism and a lot of other topics, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I didn't even know when I picked it up that it was set in the town that I grew up in. So it was set in Richmond, Virginia, which was really cool. So I even knew some of the street names that were mentioned, and that was really neat. The next book I actually just reread. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, a lot of you guys are probably rolling your eyes. Unroll them because I have an explanation, okay? This was the first contemporary romance book that I had ever read. So this was an impactful book in the sense that it got me into a new genre. This book triggered this whole shelf. Oh, that's gonna bother me. Ignore that. Okay. Instinct in me to branch off from fantasy romance and go for more real life romance. And I loved it. And so my thing with the first time I read this book is I didn't know Colleen Hoover. And if you've read Colleen Hoover, you know she is known. She is so good at those plot twists. And the first time I read it, I was not expecting what happened, okay? And I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it. It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover comes out today. So I'm literally filming this on October 18th when her book comes out. And I just reread this. I finished it last night. So I finished the reread and I'm absolutely loving it. Because I wasn't expecting the kind of twist at the end, I think that's why my reading experience with this the first time was so impactful, because I was expecting sappy, cute. I was not expecting traumatizing trigger warnings. Not expecting it. And I loved it. I loved kind of being like, oh wow. Because I've read this twice now, I can say the reading experience was different the second time. I wish I could reread it for that first time and have that feeling. It hurts my heart because I fell in love with the main hero and I wasn't expecting that twist at the end. And it wasn't just the end, there were red flags everywhere and I just wasn't expecting it. So I think the second time I read it, I already knew what was gonna happen. So I missed out again on those initial feelings and I missed that. I wish I could reread this and be just as surprised as I originally was. If you haven't read this, where have you been? Come on. Okay, what's the next book? The next book is Culty by Mariana Zapata. I feel like this is kind of a weird one to put on this list. I had never read a sports romance before, and I played soccer growing up. I wasn't good, but I played soccer growing up, and I could not stop thinking about it days after I finished it. I feel like all of these books, they're not necessarily my favorite books ever, but they have such the reading experience of these books just hit different, okay? So Culty by Mariana Zapata, I have not reread. I've only read it once, but it started my Mariana Zapata obsession, and I haven't even read many books from her. I've read 5 books from her, or 4, and I only expect to like every single one even more. So this book, Culty, is about Sal and Culty, and both of them are professional soccer players. Culty is kind of like the Messi of this world. Like, Culty's very well known in the soccer world. Sal ends up being coached by him, and it's super slow. So Mariana Zapata is known for slow romance, which I was nervous about because I hadn't read a lot of long romances yet. I'd read like some Sarah J Maas and stuff, but that's more fantasy, so I expected to be longer. This was like slow burn, and I was not used to it, but I'm so happy that I picked it up. Rainer Culty is just ingrained in my brain, and he still is to this day. He's an amazing hero. I loved him. So I think this one was more so because sports romance was introduced to me through Mariana Zapata, and I was like, who knew I loved sports so much, you know? Okay, you guys, again, are gonna hate me for mentioning this one. Can we just make this really quick? I'll make it really quick. Besides all of the drama surrounding Miss We Won't Speak Her Name. This series probably has the most nostalgic vibe for me and probably for a lot of you. I read it really late. I grew up watching the movies with my mom, I remember, but I read it in freshman or sophomore year of high school. So I was actually a little late to the game because I remember everyone reading it like in elementary, middle school. So I was a little late to reading this. I think my cousin was reading it at the time. So I was like, maybe I should read it. And I wasn't really into reading in my freshman year. It gives me the same feeling of when I think about One Direction because I don't want to even say I was obsessed because a lot of you guys were probably obsessed also, and that's just gonna make me mad because I was obsessed. And because it was in my One Direction phase, I think when I think of Harry Potter, I think of Ron Weasley and I think of Hermione and Harry, all of them. I think of them like they're real and like they're in a band almost, kind of like One Direction, and it's just, that's how I feel. It's very nostalgic. I feel like a little kid again when I think of this book. I loved this series. It was all I could talk about for months and months and months. Okay, only 2 more books. This one, it's down here with my Harry Potter ones. I feel like you guys are gonna be mad that I'm mentioning it too, but Throne of Glass changed my whole life. I cried so hard during Kingdom of Ash, and I want to cry more. I think if I reread it, I probably would cry. I'm not gonna pull out the first book, but I'll just pull out this one. I kind of just want to reread this, honestly. I want to reread the whole series, of course, but this one specifically, like the last book took me and just crushed me, and I loved it. I'm not gonna go into crazy detail about this one because everyone and their mother has read this. It's 7 books long, 8 technically if you count the 0.5. I read this in 6 days. So I was cruising through. It's almost I'm jealous of my past self for doing that because I don't have that time anymore. I want to read 7 books in 6 days again. I knew this sounded weird when I recorded it. I did not read 7 books in 6 days. I read 7 books, or 8 technically, if you count the first one. I read 8 books in 12 days, okay? Checked my Goodreads to make sure it was not 6 days, okay? I think I was just getting too excited. It was 12 days, but still, that's kind of impressive. But I love it. Where is that passion again? For real, I think that this whole series, Selena will just have a spot in my heart. Why did I call her Selena? I never call her Selena. She's always Aelin in my head. Aelin is just who I want to be if I was a fantasy character. I want to be a fantasy character. I want to be the main character in a fantasy world. If anyone has any idea on how to escape this world and go to a new one, let me know, please. Okay? The last book, I feel like if you've been following me for just like the past month, Jade City is literally all I've talked about in almost every single video. If I could reread Jade City I would sell my soul to read this one for the first time. I want to be a Cull. It's a brutal, terrible world that I want to be a part of. Honestly, this book is too kind of crazy to go into details of what it's about. Like even the main characters, right? So there's Hilo, Shay, Andon, Barrow, we love Barrow, and Lon. Only a certain person can use jade, and it's kind of like these stones that you can wear in your skin, and like to the touch, you don't even have to like ingest it. It's almost like a green little diamond that if you touch it, kind of amplify your powers that you have, okay? And people wear jade, and you can kill people to earn more jade. It's about this family who's kind of a gang, kind of Peaky Blinder-esque gang, and they go through all of these political schemes to try to become the best clan. So they're competing with another clan, and it's life-changing. I'm not kidding. It's a little slow to start. I always tell people once you get past that 200 page mark, good to go. 240 specifically is when I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna ruin me in a good way. I was so nervous to start this book. So nervous. This series scared the crap out of me. And I kind of want that feeling again because I think it made me love the book even more. I went into it with a pretty open mind because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna love this. And I ended up eating this shit up. It's always fun to go into a book not knowing if you're gonna like it, but then end up loving it. Like that's amazing, right? We all want that feeling. That is the last book. There are definitely more books that I would love to reread for the first time. I just won't get into them right now. Maybe I could do a part 2 to this video, but those are 7 books slash series that I would sell my soul, quite literally, to read again for the first time. And if you're reading them for the first time, just know I am so damn jealous of you. And I hope that if any of the books that I talked about kind of convinces you to read them, please let me know in the comments, or let me know if you've read any of these. Just let me know your thoughts and feelings on them. I would love to know your opinion. That's it for this video. Thank you for tuning in. I haven't done a sit down video in a hot minute. I've been doing a lot of vlogs, so if you liked this one, let me know. Thank you for supporting me, and goodbye. I don't know what I was gonna say. Did you get a haircut today? You did. You look so handsome.